Okay, so now we have the final panel. The nuclear industry's response. Is Europe ready to reconsider the future of its energy mix? Henri PAILLERE, Marc DEFFRENNES, and Jan PANEK, please. Please join me to the stage.
And I will be joining remotely.
Good afternoon, Henri.
Hello.
Good to see you with us.
Nice to see. Nice to be with you.
So Henri PAILLERE, Head Planning and Economic Studies, IEA. You would like to kick off the panel, please?
Okay. First of all, thank you, Claude, for having organized this edition of Entretien Européen. And I have to say the speakers before were so interesting. So I'm glad I was there from the start, and I hope I can add to the debate. So what wanted to bring in terms of perspective is the perspectives of the International Atomic Energy Agency. So of course Europe is at the heart of this world energy crisis, because it's so dependent on gas, most of which was supplied by Russia. But what I think we need to also realize that this is also affecting nations around the world, many of which are much less well equipped economically to face the crisis. And why is this happening? Well, the world is still highly dependent on fossil fuels. More than 60% of global electricity today is still based on fossil fuels. So when you look into the last decades, we've had huge investments in renewables, but the share of low carbon generation has not changed significantly. I looked at numbers between 1985 and today. 1985, we had 36% of low carbon electricity, which was essentially hydro and nuclear. And at that time, nuclear represented 15% of global electricity. And last year, 2021, 38%. So just 2% in this long period. 38% of low carbon electricity from hydro, from nuclear, but also from wind and solar. And we will need a lot more of that. And unfortunately, the share of nuclear there has reduced. And last year, I think you probably saw the numbers. For the first time since the beginning of the nuclear history, below 10%. The share of nuclear electricity last year was 9.8%. So in this context of energy crisis and geopolitical tensions, we see an increasing number of policymakers and politicians rediscovering the attributes of nuclear power. And I think it's good to remember these attributes, that it's large-scale, baseload, dispatchable, low-carbon power generation. It has stable production costs. It's not very sensitive to the price of the uranium fuel. It contributes to security of energy supply. So we're rediscovering this. And it's also contributor to climate resilience or resilience in general of energy systems. So after the oil shocks of the 1970s, we saw nuclear helping many European countries reduce their dependence on oil. So the question is, can nuclear do it again to reduce dependence on gas and coal in the coming decade and beyond? So what is clear is that investment decisions that are being made or will be made today and in the near future will have an enormous impact on the health and prosperity of the countries for generations to come. So I fully agree with what previous speakers have said. New nuclear is not a solution for the short term, but for that we have to use the existing fleet as much as possible, provided it is safe to do so. So long-term operation, lifetime extension of the existing fleet should be considered. And this is what my Director General said in his opening remarks. And in the mid to long term, we need to consider new build. And Europe is not the only region that is looking again at nuclear. As everybody knows, Asia, led by China and India, but also the Middle East and Africa are looking at nuclear. And this shift was really apparent a few weeks ago at the General Conference here in Vienna, where a record number of countries recognize officially the role of nuclear. And this is starting to show up in our projections. You know, the agency produces and publishes every year a long-term projections of installed nuclear capacity. And this year's edition, which was released also in September, we increased our high case projections for nuclear capacity from 383 gigawatts today to 873 gigawatts. And when you look at the numbers, what it means, taking into account the extension of the existing fleet, it's nearly 600 gigawatts to be built in less than 30 years. So in money, we're talking about 3,000 billion US dollars. And this would be really a major departure from the past 30 years. I looked at what happened from 1990 to now. The world installed 158 gigawatts in the last 30 years. So we need to multiply this by 4 if we want to reach this high case scenario. Unfortunately, during those last 30 years, when the world was installing 158 gigawatts, Europe only installed 5% of that. China 43%, South Korea 13%, and Russia and India 10% each. So I think we need to be clear that Europe, which was a pioneer at the beginning of the nuclear power history, has somehow lost its leadership. Our projections for the Western Europe region, which is of interest today, reflect really to a large extent, policy and investment uncertainties in the region. We have in our low case, going from 100 gigawatts today, 43 gigawatts in the low case and 133 gigawatts. So really, there's quite a range. Projections for the Eastern Europe region are much more positive. Of course, there are good news on I would say the investment frameworks. Nuclear was included finally in the EU taxonomy, and other taxonomies around the world are recognizing explicitly or implicitly the role of nuclear, Korea and China and Japan, for example. But really, we mustn't underplay the challenge to meet the role nuclear is expected to play in the transition. We will need this quadrupling really of construction starts and investments, and everybody has to play their role. Nuclear has to play the nuclear industry has to play its role, improving supply chains, reducing costs. Of course, and there was a discussion on this. Europe has developed its own technology, and we have reactors in operation in China, Finland, and soon in France and the UK. But of course, there are other vendors, and competition is fierce. And honestly, I think having also partnerships, opening up the supply chain to foreign vendors are also options to maintain technological know-how and jobs. And you just need to think of the airline industry. Boeing is relying to a great extent on a European supply chain, and Airbus is also diversified. And there are new technologies under development, small modular reactors. We published a booklet, our annual booklet on SMRs, more than 80 designs. So of course, not most of them will never actually be commercially deployed, but we need acceleration of demonstration and deployment, and the IAEA has launched an initiative to accelerate the standardization of design and the harmonization of regulatory requirements. International collaboration is key. The agency is playing its role to assist all our member states to facilitate, inform, and I would say, provide all the support for this needed expansion of nuclear to play its role, not just for the climate, but also energy security and well-being. I would like just to recall that the motto of the agency of the IAEA is not just atoms for peace, it's atoms for peace and development. So with this, I would like to finish my short, well, not so short, 10-minute intervention and pass the floor to the other speakers. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henri. Peace and development, we need nuclear. Marc DEFFRENNES, weaker founder. We heard from Henri that we need everybody on board to contribute to decarbonization, to have the long-term strategy. Do we need to revise the trajectory of the energy mix of the EU?
Yes, indeed, I believe so. Je voudrais juste parler en français.
I would like to speak French, if you don't mind, and I would like to send my greetings to Henri PAILLERE. When I was at the Commission, he was at the CEA. And, you know, he was working for the French Atomic Energy Agency. I was working at the Commission. And back in 2007, we launched a sustainable nuclear energy technology platform. All the way back to 2007, this was when the European Commission declared the nuclear power to be sustainable. Back in 2007, this was already on the table. And it's really interesting for you to have asked Henri to speak before me. I'm speaking you as a representative from the civil society organization. I used to work for OCDE, I used to work for the European Commission, and 3 years ago I created an alliance of NGOs. We cover 9 EU countries. 10 of these NGOs are members of We Care. We defend a low-carbon approach, and it goes without saying that we rely on the contribution of nuclear energy to fulfill these objectives. I have a presentation. Could you please display my presentation? I would like to start by showing you these 2 slides. It will be a way for me of setting the scene. My first slide is a slide that you, I'm sure, are familiar with. This is a slide coming from IEA, the International Energy Agency, and it shows the evolution of the carbon footprint of energy. You see the evolution over all these years, and you see the huge gap that we need to fill in. We will certainly need all hands on deck if we want to make sure that we do not move to a 6-degree scenario, but rather to a 2-degree scenario. So these are the 2 curves that you can see here at the back. There is one country, there are several countries, which was the world champion of decarbonization of its energy in terms of carbon footprint. This is the yellow curve that you can see. This is Sweden, and this is what Sweden did all the way back in the 70s. And this is what they managed to do thanks to the development of their nuclear program. I'm here to talk about global change and how we're going to address the challenge of climate change. The next challenge is the societal challenge. We haven't talked so much about the societal challenge, and this is the connection between the level of well-being of a society. You see here different countries on the chart, as well as the way those countries use the energy. You see here that there is a correlation between the energy level and the well-being level. We keep on talking about the power of restraint and sobriety, but it shouldn't be, you know, deprivation. It shouldn't be poverty. Otherwise, we will be at a risk of suffering a very big backlash. So these are the challenges that we need to rise to, the climate change challenge and the societal challenge. And now I'd like to talk to you about sustainability, the very concept of sustainability. And this is the very same diagram that Jan used. And Jan, what I think is that this is not the proper graph that we should use if we want to go about sustainability. Everybody thinks about the triangle, and we need three aspects. There are three sides to the triangle: sustainability, economics, and security of supply. But to my mind, sustainability is not correctly positioned here. Let us move to the next slide. What I think is that this is how the triangle should look like. A better triangle for energy policy should have at its foundation environment, and the security of supply must be extended to the concept of reliability, which goes well further than simply the security of supply. And this is how we're going to put sustainability at the very center of the triangle. It should be a combination of environment. I would be among the very first to acknowledge that we have to work in favor of the environment and climate, and we have to work in favor of decarbonization. But this is not enough. We should give proper consideration to the economical dimension, to the affordability dimension of energy, as well as the security of supply and the reliability of the supply. It's by mixing the three aspects that we can really talk about a sustainable energy policy. And finally, my next slide. This is the logo of We Care. You find the C that stands for clean, A for affordable, the R stands for reliable, and the E stands for energy. This is what We Care stands for. And we at European level, we try to interact with the European institutions. We have a narrative. We care for clean, affordable, reliable energy for societal sustainability, because it is our society that must be sustainable and not environment only. Way too much weight has been put on the environmental sustainability. And this leads me to taxonomy. Quite obviously, we have a complementary delegated act that paved the way. This has been the result of a political agreement. We now have a taxonomy that now includes the nuclear power as well as gas on a transient basis, provided some conditions are met. There are still many discussions going on the clarification to be sought, and I'm hope that the European Commission is going to take the bull by the horns and is going to propose positive approaches to these issues. Looking beyond the taxonomy, since nuclear power becomes sustainable, I think that we should, readdress the issue of financing. There are financing means, there are European financing tools that are available. Those tools have been developed over the past few years, just before taxonomy was on the table, and most of these European financing tools exclude nuclear power explicitly and implicitly. There are lists of projects that are eligible for financing, but you will nowhere find a project on nuclear power. Nuclear power has been explicitly excluded, but given the urgency of the situation, obviously, this file is back on the table. It involves not only the Commission, but also the Council and the European Parliament. They are reconsidering the opening up of these financing tools so that they can include nuclear projects. The same applies to Repower EU. By power, we mean electricity. And if they really care about electricity, they should really at least take a firm position on nuclear power.
I come to say a few words now about the solutions that should be brought, at least the first tentative solutions in order to solve the energy crisis we're in today. I think that as civil society, as citizens, we are getting a little, let's say, fed up by the various decisions and measures adopted at European level or national level. And this, of course, the European level ones have impact at national level. They talk about taxation of profits. I'm not against that idea. But the question is, why do we have excessive profits? We're talking about the energy checks. Well, this is fine. I mean, we can dig deeper in debt, but at some point we'll have to pay our debts. Now, I would like to come to sobriety. This is also an important point. Let's be energy efficient. Great. But let's also be careful. Let's make sure sobriety does not lead to deprivation and deprivation to poverty. In particular, talking about electricity, it is quite obvious, and we've discussed this before, but I cannot help but mentioning it as well, that this is a solution that should be structural and not related to the current situation. We have to completely reform the electricity market. I'll go beyond that even and say that we need to think about the concept of market. Do we really need a market? Well, as we said, this is a common good, as it was mentioned already. What we need to do is decouple the price of gas from the price of electricity. So somehow we need to leave this sort of market principle where the last power plant on the grid sets the price on the market. So we need to develop an electricity price that would be representative of the real generation costs for this electricity, with a profit margin, of course. That's quite natural, and especially with a margin for future investments. But we need to get back to a price that will be correlated with the costs, and not a price such as the ones that we see today, price influenced by the market. Now, if we look at costs, we need, of course, to have the lower possible costs. And in the coming years, as was repeatedly said, there are enough reports, including the ones of the OECD Nuclear Energy Agency, that show that the most economic way of producing electricity today is by extending the operational nuclear power plants. Let me take a few more minutes. I took the liberty of talking about the religion of the market. Well, I would like to talk about the Green Deal religion, or Climate Deal religion, rather. It's better than talking about the Green Deal. I may here shock some people by saying this, but I think that we need to be realistic as to the ambitions of this climate deal at European level. Once again, especially in the situation we're in today, in the crisis that we know today, minus 55% carbon in 2030, in 7 years' time. Who today will sell their house on this? Who will bet on this? Who in this room? Well, never mind, nobody would, because it's probably too ambitious. I mean, we need to realize that, okay, it could be an ambition for later. Let's keep it in mind as an ambition. But we have binding targets. This is where one needs to reflect. Now, the objective of 40% was finally not bad. I mean, reaching that would be a good thing already. Especially having a carbon target is good if it is perfectly legitimate if you want to fight for the climate. But let's stop adding more targets, renewable targets. This is not useful. This is not necessary. It's a means to an end. So let's let member states choose, according to Article 194.2 of the treaty, let's let them choose their energy mix. Through our climate policy, or rather green policy, we are actually working against this Article 194.2 of the treaty. 194 paragraph 2. So this is something that is really food for thought. Something about innovation as well. We need to strengthen research and innovation at European level, and especially research and innovation in the nuclear sector. We need to stop simply producing electricity. We know that 60–70% of our energy today is used to produce heat and not electricity. So this is for industry, this is for households. We need to work on this. And nuclear power has a role to play as heat generator and not simply as energy and electricity, rather, generator. So we need to work on Gen 4 and SMRs. And we need strong and heavy financial resources at European level. I'm not talking the 50 million annual budget in the Euratom treaty. I mean, this has been the case for many years. I mean, apparently money can be found these days to work on hydrogen. So P2P, power to power with hydrogen in the middle. I mean, come on, this is laughing stock. I mean, look at the yield. It doesn't fly. So let's take some money from there and let's invest it in the development of reactors for the future. I think that all this would create a proper framework and a set of actions that could usefully be part of an indicative nuclear program for the European community, which we are expecting as civil society with great impatience. I have to add something, and I'm really ending there. This is a last comment. It's somewhat outside of what I said, but somehow it's also connected. Yesterday, I took the metro, I took the underground, because, yes, I do travel with the metro, respecting the climate, the environment. So I'm at the Trône station, and I see a banner, an advertising banner, which left me flabbergasted. I was absolutely shocked, because a series of posters were listed one after the other. The European Union with a big flag, the European flag, and you would have there, listen, human rights, solidarity, and green energy, with a picture of a marine wind farm. Now, next, freedom, peace, energy, independence, and it was a solar panel on the picture. Do you think it's over? No, not yet. There's a next one. Democracy, diversity, and protection of the climate. The photograph was an onshore wind farm. Now, next one, unity, security, and renewable energy. And the photograph was, in fact, an electrical car that was being charged. Do you think this is it? No. There was another one, stability, respect, and environmental transition, and photovoltaic panels on the picture. Now, enough. This is enough. I mean, I don't know who's responsible for this communication at the Commission, but honestly, something needs to be done about this.
We heard that EU needs to be ambitious but also realistic, and maybe improve their communications on different subjects. So, Mr. Panek, Nuclear Deputy Director, General Director, DG Henri, European Commission. I don't envy your role now.
I was wondering what to do, whether I should actually pretend that I'm unwell. First of all, many thanks for the invitation. I should correct my title. I keep reminding Claude every time that I'm not Deputy Director General for Nuclear. I'm only Director. Deputy Director General is someone else. He's in the room, and he will hopefully make the conclusions at the end of the day if we catch up all the delay that we have accumulated so far. Yeah. I have obviously prepared with my colleagues long pages of what to say here, and as I was listening to the course of the discussions, I realized that I cannot use it because half of it was already said, half of it would be too long and we are running behind the time, so I rewrote in the course of the morning what I wanted to say. And now listening to the last two interventions, I realized that again, most of it was said, and the rest of it would be irrelevant. So I think I have to start really from scratch. And I will try to be really short because I understand we also want to do a bit of a round of questions. But the question of the panel here is Europe ready to reconsider its future energy mix? And I think it's not really a question whether it is ready to, but whether it should and how. Now, let's not forget that Europe has already been reconsidering its energy mix with all the decarbonization push that came in the past few years, and that indeed is embodied most evidently in the Green Deal that just came under a very nice iconoclastic attack, and I may come to it in a second. But we have been revising our energy mix, and we have been actually changing it so that it is decarbonized, so that it is reliable, and so that it is affordable. And I'm intentionally choosing these words which are outside of the triangle that Marc has just nicely trashed a few minutes ago. But I think we would agree on this, and we have been doing this. Now, do we need to change these principles now as a result of what has been happening in the last 1 year? I don't think we have to. I think we still need energy mix for the future, which will be low carbon, which will be decarbonized ultimately. We need one that will be reliable in terms of what Marc called fiability, and which will be affordable for consumers and also businesses. So I think the goalposts are still the same. Now, what we probably need to do now, in view of what happened in the last 6 months, is to really revisit how we have been going about that change, what needs to be accelerated, and whether there are any beliefs or any practices, traditional practices that may need to quickly change. Now, what does this all mean for us in the Commission? I think we are still operating in an environment where there is a clear article in the treaty that leaves it to member states, to each individual member state, to determine their energy mix. So with that, I think it's clearly set what are the limits for the Commission when it comes to the consideration of the nuclear industry. It's not our role to promote or discourage anyone from using nuclear. We need to make sure that those who opt for it use it in a way that is safe and, indeed, as has been said, sustainable, long-term sustainable. So that also has not changed with the last 6 months. Does the long-term perspective change? The perspective in which we are, according to all the member states' plans, aiming at an electricity mix that by 2030, but also 2050, will have about 15% of nuclear production in it, and will rely on an increasing proportion of renewables, so that they are the backbone by 2050 with about 80%. I think that has also not changed. The implication for nuclear is that it basically has to maintain the same number of gigawatt hours of installed capacity between now and 2050. And I think that's already in and of itself tall order. We have heard from Henri before that there are different models and different predictions, which some of them predict that it will be much less than the 100 gigawatt by then. Some predict much more, but I think the middle ground is somewhere around more or less the stable amount of gigawatts also by 2050. Now, what does all this mean for nuclear? Well, first of all, if we are talking a decarbonized energy mix, is there a place for nuclear in it? Well, I think the Commission said clearly that it can see nuclear under certain conditions as a sustainable decarbonized energy source. We said it in taxonomy, but also I think the Repower EU recognizes that nuclear would have a role in deep decarbonization, including through hydrogen production. That there is a role for low carbon hydrogen in addition or besides strictly renewable hydrogen. So I think there is no contradiction, or there is no wall against nuclear would have to push in this regard. Now then we come to reliability. I think reliability comes with fuel availability, fuel dependency, and I think currently we have seen a situation where, at least in part of Europe, we have nuclear sector highly dependent on external supplier of nuclear fuel that actually does not give us the guarantees of reliability. But it's not only about fuel, it's also about services. And it's not only about those 5 member states that actually have VVR type of reactors. It's about the whole nuclear industry currently being exposed to conversion, enrichment services being provided also from a provider that whose reliability is not guaranteed. But we go beyond that. We also see that the reliability of the service depends actually on the operational continuity of the sector, and I think we have seen quite some signals in this season which show that we need to have a different approach if we want to have nuclear really well established long-term in the energy mix. Affordability, I think, is also important. There, I think the challenges for nuclear remain always the same as they were before, but we need to make sure that they are not only concerning the construction time or the availability of capital, but also the full consideration of cost across the whole life cycle, including decommissioning and treatment of waste. So I think with all that, do we need to, can we actually, not do we need to, can we afford to just say, well, it's all the market fault. If we just only throw out the current model out of the window and we start from scratch, we will be fine. I'm not sure this is the case. Can we also say, well, it's all the Green Deal fault? It's all the Green Deal fault. We just need to give up on the Green Deal religion and we will be fine. I'm not sure either. What is it in Green Deal that actually prevents nuclear to play its role and contribute to a future energy system in Europe? The Green Deal is about energy efficiency and savings in energy consumption. Well, we all know that the best energy that we can have is the one that we don't use, because that saves us money and that saves the environment. Green Deal is about deep decarbonization, including in sectors like transport. Well, there I think we all know that this does offer opportunities for nuclear. Green Deal is about continued penetration of renewables. Well, we never said, hopefully, that renewables and nuclear should be competition sources in competition, that there is an interplay that can actually mean that one complements the other, etc., etc. I'm not going to recite all the objectives or all the key points of the Green Deal, but I think it's very easy to just go on the surface and say, well, you know, here is a victim. It's the Green Deal. Here is a victim. It's the market model that we have built in Europe for the 10 or 15 years. I think we need to go. Well, I'm reacting to what other people on the panel have said. So I think there are deeper questions. There are questions about the readiness of the nuclear sector to actually provide the replies. We have seen a very nice presentation before this panel about the extent of human resource that will be needed for sustained presence of nuclear in the energy mix. And I think those are very important questions. We have questions to ask about the whole ecosystem, about the availability of competencies, but also availability of the industrial chain throughout Europe. And I think these are the ones that merit deeper discussion and deeper attention rather than some iconoclasticism. So I would stop with that. Thank you.
The entire debate is not to look for the victims, but rather to look for the solutions. So I would like now to open the floor for the questions with my three last panelists. Henri, you are still with us, I hope.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yes. Okay. So, please, we have time for 2-3 questions. I see that you're.
Maybe if there are no questions, I could make a comment on the presentation. Yes, for sure there are a number of issues to be addressed by the nuclear sector, but in terms of, for example, dependency on services or fuel from external regions of the world, but it's the same also for the renewable energy sector. We know this issue of the critical minerals, and this is also a risk for the energy transition. So I would say we need to take the discussion one step higher and look at the whole transition and all the issues. And for the specific issues of human resource availability and so on, and I totally agree with these need to be addressed. But I think having an overarching energy and climate policy that fully recognizes the role of nuclear within the basket of technologies and solutions for the energy transition. This sends a signal not only to industry to invest, but also to the young people to say, yes, I'm going to go and study nuclear engineering because it's a long-term solution. So I think there also is a need for this political framework that sends the right signals to all the generations and all the sectors.
Thank you very much. There is a comment from a gentleman or question. Hope.
Yes.
It's on.
Hello. Can you hear? Okay. Yes. So my question was. Yes. Yeah. I'm Henri, one of the. Also a citizens nuclear advocate, but I was looking at a graph of total energy consumption of Germany, for example, and you talk about sobriety, so reduction in our energy consumption. And if you see in Germany since 1979, it's all-time high consumption. It's been declining, so you could attribute this partly to sobriety. You know, we became more LED. We electrified some sectors. Transport trains, for example, have been more electrified, which reduces consumption. But isn't it also linked to a flee of industrial sectors, which we still consume in our final products that we buy here in Europe, but where most of the raw materials will be now delocalized to other countries or other continents where energy is more abundant and cheaper, and actually it doesn't solve anything. So we see a total, like Germany always loves to brag about their reduction in energy and energy sobriety, but it actually hides the fact that we just delocalized that consumption of energy to places where they produce our raw materials for our products that we buy here with an even higher carbon intensity and higher pollution. So did we really win in that fight?
I think that's a good point you mentioned, which is the need to have a global system approach. And it's also true to have that global system approach when you look to the triangle which I showed, when you look to the energy policy mix, looking to environment, looking to economics, affordability, and looking to the security and reliability of supply. You should not look at that source by source. So how does nuclear play a role there? How does renewable play a role there? How does the other sources play a role there? But you need to see the integrated system. And it's the integrated system which needs to be sustainable at societal point of view. And so you have to put everything into balance, in fact. And if the renewables, they need to have gas to support them, to back up them, this needs to be integrated into these analyses of sustainability. Renewables are fully clear, fully clean, everything they are free, the sun doesn't cost. Okay, all this is wrong. I mean, you need to have a global system approach, and then you have, and it's not easy, And this is something which we have tried to do in the Commission in 2011, 2012, to have already, based on that triangle, in the frame of the European Nuclear Energy Forum, in the working groups, that is something, a reflection that we have tried to launch already at that time, but for sure it was hard to be pursued.
The debate about the raw materials is very similar to the waste debate, but yeah, Claude, I have a...
Il arrive, le micro.
Oui, voilà, moi je crois qu'il...
I think that we absolutely need to push this debate at the level of the Commission. I mean, we cannot stick to our guns, each on our side. I mean, otherwise we can never meet halfway. Yeah, and I understand that you should defend the policy of the Commission. I can fully understand that. What I don't understand is why the Commission never thinks about its own strategy, never questions its strategy. I mean, it's been years, it's been going in the same direction for years, despite perverse effects, but we never thought about that. We never reflected on the missing results or off-target results. So I suggest an assessment of public policies, European public policies, and not simply by the states that were not really supportive or half supportive of this, but together. Let's assess, let's review these public policies together. We live on the same continent, on the same planet, and we don't want to be quashed by the states, by the Russians, by China. We want to exist. Otherwise, let's move away. The European strategy is not simply based on the national plans by the states. It's not true. The states design their plans not always knowing what's part of the European guidelines, and Europe sometimes imposes choices that go well beyond the policy of the states. And in the end, they're ratified because this unanimity policy is a nightmare in certain sectors. In the end, everybody votes, even half-heartedly, and then they do whatever they want. I mean, you have the Commission policy, and then everybody nationalizes that policy afterwards, and they do what they want in their own corner, which is why we don't obtain the right results. There's no solidarity. We're not all moving in the right direction. Don't tell me that Germany is going in the right direction than Portugal. It's not true. So what I'm saying is, let's look at that. Let's assess the results. Let's open this debate to civil society. That's my first proposal for today. Assessing policies by involving everybody. Now, also we say nuclear power is responsible for this situation. It's partly true. I will not contradict you on that. Everybody has their responsibility, and nuclear power is indeed one of those responsible. It's like in France, Macron is saying it's Lévy's fault, and Lévy's saying it's Macron's fault. Well, it's a bit of both. Okay, maybe the boat was not well managed, but the other one deregulated it. Deregulation is now accepted, and the shield, the economic shield now is actually making companies heavier. So a company will be renationalized with a state that cannot manage it. And we will actually talk about this later on with EDF. I mean, signals will be given to investors, but how do you want to steer that boat? How do you want to manage it? You need a mixed governance with the consumers, with the territories, because at the top, management is actually taking the money that EDF is making. So it doesn't work that way. We need to make the right choice. When a European Union such as ours, or a government such as France's, chooses to opt in favor of nuclear power, I can tell you that it changes mindsets in society. You see stakeholders mobilizing, the energy producers, the citizens, the operators, citizens questioning or asking questions rather, is it something useful? And we have 70% French citizens in favor of the future nuclear fleet. And in the past, half of its young people thought that it generated CO2. So congratulations to education. Anyways, side comment apart. It requires an involvement of all society, because the electricity market, as it was built, is an obstacle to nuclear power. It is a hindrance because it was foreseen for the short term. It is short-sighted. I don't remember who said that, but it's short-sighted, and in fact, prices are, in fact, market prices. They're yo-yo prices, evolving up and down all the time. But we need to have a sector that cooperates to build a European industry. Now, destroying EDF, which is the largest nuclear company in Europe, and which invented the EPR, which is in China, in Kyoto, and congratulations to the Finns, it's working full speed, full power. It will soon be active in the US and in France, because that's it, the fuel is in Flamanville. I mean, we're not completely bad in this, Jan. So, on the contrary, I think that we need to support our sector. And, well, this market was created. We do not propose to leave this market, Jan. We propose to reform it so that nuclear could develop. It's not the same thing. And second, well, too many ENRs need gas. And we are told the Green Deal is great, 80% renewables. Question is, we don't want 80% renewables on the market. You need to hear it. We don't want it. We are prepared to accept up to 30, 40% renewables in the energy mix. Not more than that. Then we'll have nuclear power, heat, maybe hydrogen from nuclear, because, well, you have intermittence, so that may be necessary as well. But we want to think about a new trajectory for this energy mix. And when the European Union says, I'm imposing 80% renewables and 15% in the pink for nuclear, well, it's an indication, of course, because we'll see. I mean, this is not the right basis. This is not a sound basis. This is not a good way to develop long-term investments. Well, you know me by now. I'm sorry. I'm always a bit provocative. It's not against you, mind you. We want to work with you, Jan, with Massimo, with the DG, with the Commission. Philippe Herzog was an advisor for the Commission for 5 years, and we never regretted that. But at some point, it's becoming exhausting. There will be nobody left to contradict you in the future. And it's going to be crisis times 10.
I will let first Jan to react to Claude's comments.
Just a short response. Just a short response. Well, I don't think we are in a adversary situation. We are indeed in a discussion. This is what the purpose of these meetings is, and I don't mind being of a different opinion or being under attack. Don't worry. I think it's clear that. You said, Claude, in the beginning, pourquoi la Commission...
The Commission should ask questions.
We are putting in question a number of things, including the market design. It was said clearly that there will be a reflection on how far the current market design is actually suited, given that it results in the marginal asset setting the price, and in a situation where we are now, this means a very high price gas-based electricity. So I think we are going back to basics. We are asking those questions. If the crisis of the last 6 months teaches us something, it certainly shows us that we must look not only at the things that we always knew are subject to a dilemma, like the market model, but also things that we thought we have sorted out, like globalization, like the global, cooperation of Europe in the global context. And now we see that I think we need to rethink how we choose our global partners and our suppliers, because we cannot continue in the model that we have so far. So we are putting in question all things that need to be revisited. All I was saying in my intervention was that it's not a good start by actually burning all what we have and saying, let's start from scratch. I think we need to have a critical analysis of what works and what doesn't from what we have now, and how that actually functions. Now, on the 80%, the 80% of renewable, 15% of nuclear by 2050, this is not a target that would come from the EU, least of all from the Commission. This is the result of member states' plans, where they actually come and say, each of us has a decarbonization objective. This is how we are planning to achieve it in our member state. And when we add the 27 together, we end up with 80% renewables in the mix and about 15 of nuclear in 2050. This is the result of member states' declared intentions and choices. Now, are those the right choices? I think that's a good question. We need to look at that. We need to critically question whether the choices that they intend to make are actually fully fitting the objectives that we have set. Affordability, reliability, decarbonization. But it's not that someone from Brussels tells them you need to be at 80%. Let's be correct about this. We have targets for 2030, not for 2050.
The final question from Christian Legrand, please.
It's not a question, but anyway. Christian Legrand, European Nuclear Society. It's the hour of the aperitif. And after what Marc said, I would come for the young generation to two elements. The first one is that if you read again the papers of the European Commission in the year 70, it was the declaration, we have to go out the gaz. On doit sortir du gaz. C'était le grand...
That was the big motto of the Europe at the time. Now we are 50 years later. It was written that way. I can find you the document. That's what it said. But 50 years ago, in Europe, we launched a large project on hydrogen. I worked 25 years in research. So my question is, what has changed today in terms of technologies? Has the carbon cycle changed and so on? So these are two thoughts for the lunch break, but the problem is that we are all aging, we are all white heads, and we have to recall history. We will not build the new technologies. Third thought, as a citizen, I don't understand, as an economist, how we cannot change a stupid rule when it comes to the price of electricity, and then all states, including Belgium, is bragging about taxing over profits. The over profits come from a stupid rule, which is that it is the last megawatt produced by a gas plant that will determine what is the price of electricity. That is stupid. We'll have to fight on this. You know, producers have good lawyers to come out of this crisis by saying we taxed over profit.
Thank you very much. So the debate is continuing, and the next part is on energy mix, and Jessica will be moderating it. Jessica Johnson from Nuclear Europe. For me, thank you very much. We hope that the strategy is based from the ENS perspective of the scientific-based arguments. Thank you very much.
Voilà. Alors, je crois, oui, c'était vraiment intéressant.
So this was very interesting. Thank you very much. I understand that this debate is not an easy one, but we must have it. And we're not here to pat ourselves on the back. We have to discuss those core topics. We have a crisis ahead of us, so we are in charge of it, because the young generation will ask us what we did.